You do not want to miss this episode. If you're a business owner, if you're a Canadian, if you're a sports fan, we got something for everyone. We're going to educate you and entertain you all at the same time, all in this one podcast. I'm interviewing a great friend of Control and Compounds, the first person from Cole Harbor ever to win a Stanley Cup. That's right. I'm talking to Joe DiPenta today. Joe is our EOS implementer and also happens to be a Stanley Cup champion. So we're going to talk sports and business today. Let's dig in. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Control and Compound. I am Darren Mitchell, and I'm very excited today. I get a chance to talk to our good friend Joe DiPenta. Joe is a just obviously a great hockey player with his NHL Stanley Cup in his background, but even a better person, and he's been instrumental in helping us implement this EOS. So we're going to talk a little sports. We're going to talk a little EOS and business. And I'm excited to welcome Joe DiPenta. Joe, welcome to the show.
Hey, Darren, thanks for having me.
Uh, Joe, I'm excited. I look back and we grew up a couple miles from each other in Nova Scotia, Dartmouth, Cole Harbor area. We both played hockey. If I look at our careers, between us, we've won a Calder Cup, a Stanley Cup, and a silver medal in the over 45 Eastern Shore Gentlemen's Hockey Tournament. It doesn't matter who won; they're all medals, Joe. But but Joe, I know you're a devoted dad, you're a devoted husband, but you're a Canadian and you got to live the dream. You got to play in the NHL and you got to hoist that cup. So tell us when you started playing hockey, a little bit of your hockey upbringing in Nova Scotia.
My family didn't grow up with the game, so it was kind of a coincidental that I even got involved. There was a pond behind my house, and the kids would play there when I was 2 years old. I remember watching them play and thought, "Hey, I want to get out on the ice and see what that's about," and started to skate. Fell in love with skating, and then my parents bought me a hockey net for the basement to shoot around, and I liked that a lot. And my mom, I was a firstborn, and she didn't want her son to get into any trouble. So she said, let's get him into hockey. So that's what they did. But my dad didn't really play hockey, and it wasn't part of our family until they first got me some skates and the gear and started taking me to the rink. And I was a natural. And that was it.
Yeah, I remember hearing the stories about your novice wrist shot didn't fit in with the other kids. You had a pretty good shot starting out, and then you played hockey all around here, and then at what point did you have to move away for hockey the first time?
I was 16 years old and moved down to Boston and pursued NCAA career. It was back then there wasn't a lot of players doing that. Most of the players from Canada go and play major junior and play for the the CHL. And I had an opportunity to do that, and I decided to turn it down and go down to the US and spent 1 year down in Boston at prep school. And then I went and played tier two hockey in Ottawa for my last year of high school. And that's where I got a full scholarship to Boston University.
Very cool. And then what brought you back to Halifax?
I was playing 2 years at Boston University, getting ready to play my 3rd year, and the Mooseheads had drafted me 3 seasons before and a late pick, knowing that I was going to Boston University, and they every summer for 3 summers, they kept, increasing the amount of money that they were offering me to come back and play in Halifax. It started off with a scholarship to a Canadian university, and then the next year it was your sister and you can get a scholarship to a Canadian university. And then the year they were hosting the Memorial Cup, my last eligible year, they just wrote me a check. And so I said, all right, I'll come back. And then if the check was enough to cover my 2 years at Boston University in case it didn't work out, I could go graduate at BU and move on with my life if I got hurt or something. So that's what prompted the move back, of course, playing in my hometown and living at home. And I'd given up a few of those teenage years moving away, so I felt like it was a chance to come back and be around some friends and, loved ones that I had missed out some time on and got to play for the Memorial Cup, which was pretty cool too, in front of all my hometown fans. So that's what prompted the move back.
Very cool. Now we hear a lot, Joe. Like I love some of your stories. I've been fortunate enough to spend a lot of time with you. Um, But we always hear about the dads, how influential the dads were in someone's hockey career, and dad would do this and dad would do this. Why don't you tell us how influential not just your dad was, but your mom? Tell us about what your mom did to help you make it to the NHL.
So mom was she was a part of, that journey, and she was at all my games, and but of course dad was the one taking me to the practices at 6 a.m., etc. Um, so my mom played a role where she she was an overprotective mom and always kept me out of trouble. And one my first game with the Halifax Mooseheads, I was I knew that I was gonna have to get into some sort of a fight during the season because that was just part of the game back then, and I hadn't done any fighting in my entire life. I was pretty green growing up, and lucky I lived in a pretty solid neighborhood, and it just wasn't part of, something I had to do, but I was very prepared. I took boxing lessons for a couple summers and getting ready, and I chose the first game that I decided I'm gonna initiate a fight and just get it out of the way because I was pretty nervous about it. And so I get into a fight with a guy from Sackville named Daryl Jarrett. And Daryl was younger, and I didn't know who he was. And I remember throwing the first punch and missing. And then after that, there wasn't much of a fight after that. I lost pretty badly. The next day, the newspapers, front page of the sports section said those hands weren't made for fighting, and it was my picture on it. So I was embarrassed as a 20-year-old would be in their hometown. And I didn't fight for the rest of the year as a result, and that I didn't have to fight. I was a 20-year-old and this more of a scorer at the time, and so I didn't have to do that, but it was just kind of an excuse not to have to face that fear. So fast forward a year in the season, and I'm signed with the Philadelphia Flyers organization. I'm playing the my first professional game, and I get into another fight, and I get my nose broken. And I thought, oh man, I'm not fighting ever again. This is awful. So I went for another 3 months, no fighting, and I started to be a healthy scratch. And my mother came to visit, and she asked me how things were going, and I said, well, mom, they're not going so good. They want me to fight. And then what I thought she was gonna say was, "Honey, you just come home after the season. I'm gonna take care of everything. These are just mean people here." And what she ended up saying to me, which was totally influential, she looked at me, she said, "Joe, I guess you better start fighting then." So my mother called me out, and I had nowhere to hide after that. I said, "Well, if my mom wants me to fight, then I better start fighting." And a couple of games later, I took the leap again, and the next thing I knew, I was getting escorted to the penalty box, and my whole team was cheering for me, and I actually did okay, and I never looked back. I ended up in 49 career hockey fights over the next 10 years, and I took karate lessons. I learned how to cope with that skill and do it when I had to, and but my mom was instrumental in helping me overcome that obstacle.
Well, it served you well, with your career. So so I want to jump ahead to getting to Anaheim and that Stanley Cup year. That whole year must have been just a magical career. What was it like playing on that team with guys like Timo Solani and Scott Niedermayer? Like, Scott Niedermayer was like a god at that point. Like, what there was nothing he couldn't do. What was it like playing with that team, and when did you know this team could go all the way?
Well, it's funny, we started off I was a newly signed player. The team they signed me, and I wasn't sure I was gonna make the team because spent 5 years in the American Hockey League. Then I thought maybe they'd send me back down, but they did tell me I had a chance to make it, and I did. So I was just happy to be there, just trying to fit in and just excited every day. I was counting the money I was making, that I was making every day by day. I was like, wow, I just made another $2,000 today playing and I was a healthy scratch for the first couple games. But I didn't care. I just wanted to be there. And I looked around the locker room at Team Mussolini, Scott Niedermayer, these heroes of mine, and that was just surreal. And then the first 3 months of the season were kind of weird, where we had a new general manager, and he came in with a different set of values than the Mighty Ducks, or the Disney group, the previous, and he different general manager, different set of values. So he systematically dismantled the team over the 3 months. He started trading guys like Sergei Fedorov and Peter Sikora, Ozolinsh, some of the guys that had been there for a long time. And because they didn't fit the values of like the tough style of play that Brian Burke wanted to see on the ice. And we started the season as a team that wasn't expected to make the playoffs. The year before, it was a lucky year, but the year before that, with pretty much the same makeup of players, they didn't make the playoffs. But of course, the year before that, in 2003, they went to the finals. But we weren't expected to make it. And by Christmas time, we were like 12th seed in the conference, pretty much where everyone expected us to be. But he had started making these trades. And after Christmas, we had some new personnel, and we were the second best team in the league. We went on a run. The only Detroit Red Wings were better than we were after Christmas, and we ended up making the playoffs. And we went all the way to the Final Four, but lost in the semifinals, and it was just a transformation. And it was all about having the right people in the right seats. And then in the summer, Brian wasn't he knew that we needed one more piece, and that was Chris Pronger. He had Timo Solani, who was 36 years old and never won a Stanley Cup. He convinced Timo to take a $3 million contract when he had scored 40 goals and could have gotten an 8 million. And he then used that money to go sign Chris Pronger. And that was the difference. So I mean, unselfish of Timo, who never won a Stanley Cup. And Timo was a guy that made promises to everyone. He said, "Hey, if we win a Stanley Cup, I'm gonna buy you a Corvette." He just thought if he put it out there that he would get this like goodwill would happen. And so he had a answer all these promises after we won. He wrote a check to our video coach for 35 grand to go buy a Corvette. And the video coach never cashed it. He just still has the check in his drawer next to his bed, he said, but he never cast the check. But yeah, that was Timo. So it was an amazing experience. But it wasn't until after we signed Chris Pronger that we felt, hey, we have a team that can win it.
And then tell me about the T-shirt you guys wore under your jerseys that year, and what that meant.
Yeah, so we went on a run at the start of the season, set an initial record for most games undefeated to start a season. We really started by our general manager Brian. He came into the start of the season, and he said, "Guys," he says, "I've got some great news." He said, "We've been chosen to win the Stanley Cup this year by the Hockey News." And the Hockey News, I don't know if it still is, but I know back then it was like the Bible. And so he said, "Isn't that great?" And he's a very sarcastic, he's not somebody that's giving you throwing around compliments, especially that we were waiting for the what he was going to come back with next. And he goes, "Guys," he says, "guess what else? Guess how many times the Hockey News has predicted successfully the team to win the Stanley Cup over the last 8 years?" He goes, "0." He said, "Not only that," he said, "now they've put a target on our back so that every team that plays us is gonna, come with their best game because they picked us to win." But what he did, he went on to tell us that if we didn't win the season, it was gonna be considered a failed season. We were considered the team of destiny. That's what the Hockey News that was the tagline, "Team of Destiny," the Anaheim Ducks. And so we started to believe that we were the team of destiny. So fast forward to the playoffs, and one of our players, Todd Marchand, was injured for the first round, and he was kind of feeling left out. So he decided to make T-shirts for us during the playoffs, and he just put the word passion on it. And it was kind of just a fun joke towards Timo Solani because Timo was always talking to us about how we have to have passion. And whenever he got excited, he talked in his caveman accent, Finnish accent, and we couldn't really understand him. And he just said passion, and we gotta have passion. And so he made fun of that, and we all laughed. And then after we won the first round, he created another T-shirt, and he said "Destiny is passion." And he used that word destiny back from the beginning of the season, which was part of our vision that we were the team of destiny that we deep down believed. And then we added another word to it for the third round. He made a new T-shirt and it said "Destiny's heart and passion." And then when we got to the finals, we had a lot of sacrifice that went into those 2 months. So he said it was Destiny's heart, sacrifice, and passion. And it was a very organic statement that Todd created. I don't think with the help of anyone else. And that became our motto. And on the inside of we got the ring on the inside of the ring, it says "Destiny is heart, sacrifice, and passion." and the owners, when they found out about it, they loved it, and they decided to put it on the ring for us.
That is so cool. So what was it like the first time you hoisted the cup over your head? How magical was that?
It was surreal, totally surreal. It still doesn't feel like it actually happened. When I think about it, I'm like, "Wow, I got actually to do that," or if I watch the Stanley Cup Finals every year and I see the guys lift the cup, "Wow, I actually got to do it," and it's, um, the best way for me to describe it was I get to lift the cup for about 6 seconds the first time around before I felt self-conscious that I was hogging it, and I needed to give it to somebody else, and that feeling was it was, uh, it was like a feeling of relief that it was over, that we finally had accomplished it, that it wasn't it was so hard to get there. It was such a emotional drain and physical drain over those 2 plus months that I didn't wanna get that close and not win, and I knew that I probably would never get another chance, and so therefore, I was just, like, all in. We have to win this, and so when I lifted it, it was like, "It's over. We did it. We accomplished it," and it was yeah, it was just a really special moment, and I felt like it was like a culmination, and all the people that had helped me on the journey, the community, my coaches, my mom and dad, my wife, my sisters and grandmothers, and everyone that it's friends that were watching on TV, they were all part of it, and I just wanted them to feel like they were part of it, and it was meant to be shared at that point. That was what I felt the rest of the summer. I have to share this with everyone that's been a part of this journey, and that's what I did when I had my 24 hours of the cup, and so, yeah, the moment was it's over, and I needed this is a special moment for all the people that have been part of this journey with me.
So the 24 hours with the cup, I was always fascinated by that. Just so cool. The guy travels and he get the white gloves and stuff. But like, well, what do you do when you go to sleep with the cup? Or do you go to sleep that day? Like you want to maximize all the time, but if you really have it for 24 hours, is there a point where like they take it at nighttime or you got it for the night?
So the way they do it now, and this is probably for the last 15 years, okay, we won or yeah, it was a couple years after we won, they changed the rule. Okay. So the way it works now at midnight, it's gone. They take it. Okay, because too many bad things have happened to the Stanley Cup after midnight, apparently, and they decided enough is enough. So at midnight, the keeper of the cup, who's travels with it, he takes it and says that the party is over for the Stanley Cup. Continue to have fun, but the Stanley Cup's going to bed. When I had it or when we had it as a team, that wasn't the rule. So the keeper of the cup, he traveled with it, and he was a great guy, Mike, and he had been to several parties over the summer, and so that was quite a life for him, and he said when we had our Stanley Cup parade in Cole Harbor, he said, "Joe, this is the most people I've ever seen at a parade for anyone with a Stanley Cup, and this is amazing." We had 2 or 3,000 people in Cole Harbor. This is before Sydney won it. 2 years later, Sydney won it, and there were 60,000 people there, so I think Sydney had a lot more people than his, but then that night, he was so impressed with how well organized it was, and he felt really confident in us that we got to the hotel room at around midnight, and we just had a suite, and I had just my closest friends there, and we were just taking pictures with it, and it's been a long day, and I just wanted to have, like, a small gathering. So there's maybe 10 folks there, and he had a room, and he just said, "Guys, I trust you. I'm gonna get a couple hours sleep," which is a luxury for somebody like me when I go to these events, and, "Yeah, you guys are good," and we did not sleep. I remember staying up till 6 AM, and that's when he left to go to the airport, and I watched the sunrise over Halifax Harbor, and I thought, "Man, what a ride that was, 24 hours straight, no sleep," and it was a pretty special, like, day to share with everybody, and I remember some highlights where I had the Trailer Park Boys at the event, and they were drinking from the Stanley Cup, and I had another, highlight was my grandmother, who would have been, I don't know, around 80 years old. She was drinking beer out of the Stanley Cup, and she doesn't drink, so that was kinda cool, And, it was just we had 300 people, and we took it to my grandmother's nursing home, and, had a Coal Harbor Place, and, IWK Children's Hospital. So there was a lot of cool things that happened over that 24 hours that made it really special.
That's awesome. Okay, Joe, I wanted to, pivot now. So you finished playing pro hockey, and then you went back to university for a couple of years, and then you get into the business world, and you had several leadership roles. You were VP of an organization, and then you became an, EOS implementer. And, again, we've talked often on the podcast about this EOS that we're doing, Entrepreneur Operating System. So what led you to become an EOS implementer? How did that even get on your radar?
Alright, so the real story is I was a vice president, executive director in an organization that's implemented EOS. I self-implemented it into my local area and did a really bad job of it. Looking back, I didn't do a very good job at all. And then we hired an implementer, and it got a lot better, after we hired an implementer. And then I had left that leadership role, joined another organization, and I remember feeling like, "Hey, I'm not sure I made the right decision." And I said a prayer when on the way to the rink one day. I was going to in the summertime, 3 weeks in this new job, and I said, "God, if you want me to become an EOS implementer, give me a sign." 45 seconds later, I pulled up to a stoplight in Coal Harbor, and then across from me was a van, and on the van it said traction. And I thought, "Okay, that's a pretty clear sign that you want me to become an implementer." So I held on for another year or so before making the leap, and then a friend of mine introduced me to a business owner in the community who wanted to implement traction. And I thought, "Oh my goodness, here is my opportunity." Like, I didn't even have to go looking for my first client, it just landed on my doorstep. And I started working with that company, helping them and doing EOS. And I thought, "Man, I love this. This is exactly what I was made to do." And so I took the leap, and I've been doing it full time for about 4 years.
That's awesome. Well, you've been instrumental to help us grow our business. So for those that aren't familiar with EOS, let's kind of back it up and like big picture. What is EOS? How would you explain EOS to someone who's never heard of it?
So EOS stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's a way of orchestrating and harmonizing all the moving parts of your business to help you run a better business and ultimately live a better life. When we work with leadership teams, we help them get stronger at 3 areas. And those 3 areas are vision, traction, and healthy. So vision is helping all the leaders in the company to get on the same page with a vision and plan. Traction is helping them be more disciplined and accountable. So everywhere you look, you see people executing on the shared vision. And then healthy is creating a healthy, cohesive leadership team. And then as goes the leadership team, so goes the rest of the organization. We eventually get everybody in the company seeing the same shared vision, understanding the plan, want to be part of it, all much more disciplined and accountable, and creating a healthy culture where everyone loves spending time together. That's what EOS accomplishes when it's fully rolled out into a business.
Very cool. And so I remember the whole sort of system that we started going through, and now we're like clockwork. Every quarter we do it. So that's been very helpful for us where we don't take on too much at a time. We found, we used to have 20 balls in the air and nothing actually get done, or not a lot got done. Now we're just so systematized in our process. So walk me through the EOS process. How would you explain the EOS process to a new person?
So it starts off for those that are curious. We can have a 15-minute call just to kind of learn more, kind of where you're at in your business, and then from there, if there's an interest, there's a free 90-minute meeting with the leadership team where the implementer, me, implementer coach, would come and show the team what it looks like fully rolled out into the business. So they get a picture of what the end looks like. And then if there's buy-in to start that journey, then there's a series of foundational days over a 2-month period. There's 3 of them spaced out about 30 days apart. And we build a foundation of execution on day one and day two. About 30 days later, we start to work out the kinks and bugs on that foundation of execution and accountability. And then we start to layer in some of the visionary tools. So we start to get clear vision and plan. Then 30 days later, we go back into the business and continue to practice. And then we come back together approximately 60 days after we start it for the third foundational day, where again, we're working out those kinks or bugs on those executional tools and accountability tools. And then we're finishing off the vision and plan tools so that we've got at the end of 60 days together, we've got a clear vision, a clear plan, and a clear foundation, a strong foundation for execution and accountability at the leadership team level. And then at that point, we start to go into full on execution mode and meet approximately every 90 days. And we create a 90-day world so that we're disciplined and accountable and focused on executing our vision every 90 days. And that becomes the meeting pulse in perpetuity within the EOS model and the EOS process is this 90-day world. And I work with the leadership team for during that journey, run the quarterlies, and there's also an annual where we have a day of strategic planning, a day of team health, and we just continue on that meeting pulse. And eventually the team will roll that out to the rest of the teams in the organization. So these foundational tools will get rolled out and all the teams will get in that 90-day rhythm, that 90-day world. And that's how we create traction towards the vision.
Yeah, I think for us, I mean, there's so many pieces, but those rock. So I referenced them earlier. So, we have our leadership team meeting every Monday afternoon, and you know, a little hey, how you doing? And then we get into it. Where are we with these rocks? And I'll joke on the weekend to my wife. It's like, uh-oh, I better get some stuff done. I'm gonna get in trouble with the leadership team tomorrow if I don't get my task done towards my rocks. And the first time we picked rocks with you, you said it'd be a learning experience, and I just assumed you didn't know how great we were. And lo and behold, you were 100% right. We got really aggressive rocks saying, "Oh, the next 90 days, I'm gonna do this and do this and do that." And then you get to the end of it in 90 days, and you're like, "Holy crap! There's no way I could have that was such a big project." So now we're every quarter we're getting better at picking realistic rocks. But again, if we have 10 projects, and then that's what we went through the annual planning days with you, all these projects, and it's like, okay, forget about all the projects. What are the ones you're going to focus on in the next 90 days? And then have a weekly meeting to see how you're progressing on each one of those, identify the issues and the to-dos. That alone has been totally worth the EOS process for us. And the other one is right person, right seat. Can you just talk a little bit about that, Joe? Because those two things for us, identifying all the seats and then right person, right seat and the rocks, those are my two favorite parts. All kinds of great parts, but those are my two favorites.
Yeah, well, the rocks, the beauty of rocks is that you set these goals and projects and you prioritize, and then you've got 13 weeks where you meet to then hold yourselves accountable to get it done. And so that accountability is pretty strong when you get 13, you have to report it 13 times, whether it's on track or off track. And so I love that. And then to speak to the right people, right seeds, the right people are people that fit the core values of the company, and so we take the time to discover what the core values are, so you know what a great person looks like, and you get really clear in on defining what are the behaviors that make up the great person in your unique organization. So once you've got a clearly defined description of what those core values are and what they look like when you see them, then you can then use them to hire, fire, recognize, review, and reward. So that's what makes up the right person, and then you have to have them in the right seat, which is another way of saying that they have to be in the right seat to perform. They have to perform well at the job that they're in, the seat that they're in. So we get clear on what are the seats in the organization. So we map out what are each of the seats look like. So we're crystal clear on what's the right structure, and then within the structure in each of the seats, we get clear on what they're accountable for. So we have 3 to 7 roles in each of the seats to say, this is what we want in this function of the business. For this function to be working really well, we need these 3 to 7 things to be done well. And then after you get clear in that structure and clear in what the roles and responsibilities are in each of the seats, then you start putting names into them And when you put a name in there, you're saying, I think this person can perform all 3 to 7 of these roles really well. And the way you evaluate them is you use an acronym called Get It, Want It, and Capacity, or GWC is the acronym. And they have to get it, they have to want it, and they have to have the capacity to do everything that's listed in that seat. Get it, of course, means they have the natural ability to do everything that's listed there. Want it means they're generally motivated to come to the office every day to do everything that's listed in the seat. And then capacity to do it means they've got the skills, the training, the experience to do everything that's listed. And if they're a yes, yes, yes to GWC, then they're in the right seat. And if they're the right person, they fit the core values, then that's what right person, right seat means. And a lot of companies, they struggle with not having the right people in the right seats. And when you can make those adjustments and get right people in the right seats, and it's not an overnight thing, usually takes, like, you start to see some movement on it little by little, but by the end of 1 year, you've made some pretty big improvements. And then by the second year, you're like, wow, this has been a transformational. It makes a huge, huge difference. And I share with you the story of the Anaheim Mighty Ducks and where we were at 3 months into the 2005, 2006 season, and then where we went just in 3 months, how transformational it was for us. And then you fast forward like 1 year from then to win a Stanley Cup and not be a playoff team, and then 1 season later win a cup. I mean, that's the power of right people, right seats.
All right, Joe, thanks. That was awesome. I could talk about EOS all day, and at least once a quarter we do talk about EOS all day. But I think that's great. I love the Anaheim Duck story. Reminds me a lot of the Control and Compound story as we're growing. A business of destiny. No. Um, we're the best place for people to get a hold of you, Joe. If they just Google Joe DiPenta EOS, I think your website pops up, or they can find you on LinkedIn. Any other places to look for you, Joe? Or are those two best?
No, those are the 2 best ones. You Google my name and EOS, and they'll bring you to my website on the EOS Worldwide platform, and also LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn, and that's also another way to connect.
Awesome. All right, Joe DiPenta, EOS implementer, Stanley Cup champion, friend of Control and Compounds. Thanks so much for doing this, Joe. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Darren. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching this episode of Control and Compound. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button so you never miss a new episode. And if you're ready to learn more, head to our website, controlandcompound.com. The link's below.